In the heart of the Roman Empire, law was the foundation of civilization. It was a source of pride, a symbol of order and justice. But above the law stood one man, the emperor, and when that man was Caligula, the very foundations of Rome began to tremble. What happens when absolute power falls into the hands of someone with no restraint? This isn't just a story of ancient scandal. It's a chilling look at how quickly authority can spiral into tyranny, and how fear can become the air that an entire empire breathes. When Gaius Caesar, nicknamed Caligula, or Little Boot from his childhood days in military camps, first ascended to the throne, Rome celebrated. He was the son of the beloved general Germanicus, and the people saw him as a breath of fresh air after the gloomy reign of Tiberius. In his first few months, Caligula was everything they had hoped for. He granted bonuses to the military, abolished unfair taxes, and freed citizens who had been unjustly imprisoned. It seemed like a golden age was dawning. But this dawn was short-lived. A severe illness, perhaps encephalitis or epilepsy, struck the young emperor. He survived, but he was a changed man. The generous, level-headed ruler was gone. In his place was a man who was paranoid, cruel, and consumed by his own sense of divinity. The line between man and God blurred in his mind, and he began to demand that he be worshipped as a living deity. He even replaced the heads of famous statues of gods with his own likeness. This wasn't just arrogance, it was a direct assault on Roman tradition and religious belief. His personal life became a spectacle of excess and depravity. He held lavish banquets that bankrupted the treasury, indulging in the most exotic and expensive foods imaginable. But it was his treatment of people that revealed the true depth of his cruelty. He took the wives of high-ranking senators as his own, only to discard them after a short time. He was known to whisper to his executioner to make his victims feel that they are dying, prolonging their agony for his own amusement. No one was safe. A wrong glance, a whispered comment, or simply being too wealthy could earn you a death sentence. Perhaps the most famous story of his madness involves his beloved horse. Caligula doted on this animal, giving it a marble stable, a jeweled collar, and even a house with servants. But then he took it a step further. He declared his intention to make his horse a consul, one of the highest political offices in Rome. Historians debate whether he was serious or if this was a calculated insult to the Senate, a way to show them that his horse was more worthy of power than they were. Either way, the message was clear. Their traditions, their honor, and their authority meant nothing to him. The constant fear and humiliation became unbearable. The very people meant to protect the emperor the Praetorian Guard were, the ones who decided he had to be stopped. They couldn't stand his insults, his erratic behavior, and the ever-present threat of being his next victim. In the year 41 AD, after less than 4 years on the throne, Caligula was cornered in a palace corridor and assassinated by officers of his own guard. His reign of terror was over. The story of Caligula serves as a timeless warning. Imagine you're living in ancient Rome. The year is 37 AD. A young man, just 24 years old, rides into the city, hailed as a savior. This isn't just any young man. This is Gaius Caesar, better known to history as Caligula. The crowds are ecstatic. They see him as the son of the beloved hero Germanicus, a breath of fresh air after the gloomy reign of Emperor Tiberius. The future of the Roman Empire looks brighter than ever. For a few glorious months, it seems their hopes are justified. Caligula starts his reign with incredible promise. He frees citizens who are unjustly imprisoned, he burns the records of treason trials, and he hosts lavish games and spectacles for the people. He's generous, he's charismatic, and he seems to genuinely care about his subjects. Rome breathes a collective sigh of relief. They believe they have found their perfect emperor, a leader who will guide them into a new golden age. But this honeymoon period, this beautiful dream, would soon curdle into an unimaginable nightmare. Just 7 months into his rule, Caligula falls gravely ill. The entire empire holds its breath, praying for his recovery. And he does recover, but the man who emerges is not the same one who fell sick. Something inside him has snapped. The once benevolent ruler becomes a monster of vanity, paranoia, and cruelty. He begins to see conspiracies everywhere. He executes senators and nobles on a whim, often for the flimsiest of reasons, or sometimes for no reason at all. He confiscates their fortunes to fund his extravagant lifestyle, leaving a trail of terrified, grieving families in his wake. His actions become increasingly bizarre and he starts to believe he is a living god, demanding that his statues be placed in temples and worshipped alongside Jupiter himself. He builds a tomb-long floating bridge across the Bay of Naples, just so he can ride his horse across it. A stunt meant to prove he could defy the gods of the sea. It's a massive, pointless expenditure that drains the Roman treasury. And then there's the infamous story of his horse. Caligula adores this horse, giving it a marble stable, a jewel-encrusted collar, and even servants. He reportedly plans to make Incitatus a consul, the highest political office in Rome. Whether he was serious or just mocking the Senate, it showed his complete contempt for Roman tradition and governance. The people who once cheered for him now live in constant fear. His cruelty knows no bounds. He takes pleasure in watching tortures and executions during his meals. He forces senators to run 4 miles in front of his chariot. He builds opulent palaces and throws decadent parties, while the state finances crumble. His personal life is a scandal, filled with incestuous rumors about his relationships with his sisters. Rome is no longer a republic or an empire. It's the personal playground of a deranged tyrant. The dream of a golden age has become a living hell, all dictated by the whims of one man's broken mind. The breaking point finally arrives. The very people sworn to protect the emperor, the Praetorian Guard, can no longer tolerate his madness. They have witnessed his depravity firsthand and know that Rome cannot survive under his rule. On January 24th, 41 AD, as Caligula walks through a secluded corridor in his palace, a group of guards, led by an officer named Cassius Chaerea, ambushes him. After less than 4 years of terror, the reign of the mad emperor ends in a flurry of dagger strikes. His death sends a shockwave through the empire, a brutal end to a Imagine a world where one man's whim is law. A world where an emperor believes he's not just a ruler, but a living god. This wasn't a fantasy epic. This was the Rome of Emperor Caligula. His name has echoed through history, not for his wisdom or benevolence, but for his breathtaking audacity and his belief that he was absolutely untouchable. And everyone in it, from the highest senator to the lowest commoner, was merely a prop for his grand performance of power. To Caligula, traditional Roman values were a joke. The Senate, once the backbone of the Republic, became his personal comedy club. He would humiliate senators, forcing them to run 4 miles behind his chariot or making them stand in as servants during his lavish banquets. He declared his favorite horse, Incitatus, a priest, and even promised to make him a consul, the highest office in Rome. Was he serious, or was it the ultimate mockery? A way to show the senators that his horse was more worthy of power than they were. Either way, the message was clear. Your traditions mean nothing to me. His contempt wasn't limited to politics. He targeted religion, the very heart of Roman identity. The Romans worshipped a vast pantheon of gods, but Caligula decided there was room for one more. Himself. He demanded that his own statues be placed in temples across the empire, including the sacred temple in Jerusalem, a move that nearly sparked a massive rebellion. Making a senator grovel wasn't about punishment. It was about demonstrating that the senator's dignity was his to give and take. Making people worship him wasn't about piety. It was about proving that his will could override centuries of faith. Every cruel, bizarre, and blasphemous act was a calculated test of his own perceived invincibility. And perhaps to himself, that he was beyond the rules that govern everyone else. We're tired of the constant fear, the unpredictable cruelty, and the national humiliation. In 41, and after less than 4 years on the throne, the stage play came to a violent end. The Praetorian Guard, led by Cassius Chaerea, and Caligula, had relentlessly assassinated the emperor. Caligula's story is a chilling reminder of how quickly power can corrupt and how absolute power can create a reality distorted by ego and paranoia. He believed he was above law, religion, and humanity itself. He saw Rome as his personal property and its people as his tools. But in the end, the tools turned against their master, proving that no matter how powerful someone thinks they are never truly untouchable. Ever wonder why ancient Rome was so obsessed with virginity? You might think it's a personal or moral issue, but for the Romans, It was pure politics. A woman's virginity wasn't just her own business. It was a symbol that held the entire empire's honor, its religious harmony, and its social stability in its very threads. To control a woman's purity was to control Rome itself. Let's start with the Vestal Virgins, the most famous virgins in Roman history. These weren't just priestesses. They were living national treasures. Chosen as young girls, they took a 30-year vow of celibacy to serve Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and home. Their primary job was to keep the sacred flame of Rome burning, a flame that symbolized the city's eternal life. If that flame ever went out, it was a catastrophic omen, spelling disaster for everyone. The Vestal's virginity was directly linked to the health of the state. It represented a pure, unbroken connection to the gods. If a Vestal broke her vow, it was considered a terrifying act of pollution. The Romans believed it would anger the gods and invite famine, plague, or military defeat. The punishment was brutal and theatrical. The unchaste Vestal was buried alive in an underground chamber with a small amount of food and water, left to die. This wasn't just a punishment for her. It was a public ritual to cleanse the entire city of her perceived corruption. Her male partner, by the way, was usually flogged to death in public. This shows just how seriously they took it. A single person's chastity was tied to the fate of millions, but this obsession wasn't just limited to the religious sphere. For the average Roman family, a daughter's virginity was a valuable asset. In a society built on alliances and inheritances, marriage was a critical business transaction. A bride's virginity was proof of her undamaged state, guaranteeing that her children would be the legitimate heirs of her husband. This ensured that family property, status, and bloodlines passed down without any question or dispute. A father would guard his daughter's purity fiercely because it was his key to forging powerful connections. An unvirgin daughter could bring immense shame upon the entire family, jeopardizing their social standing and financial future. Her value on the marriage market would plummet, and the family's honor would be stained. So, from a young age, girls were taught that their bodies were not their own, but belonged to their family first, and then to their future husband. This control over female bodies was woven into Roman law and social structure. The head of the family, the paterfamilias, had almost absolute power over his children, including the right to arrange their marriages. This power dynamic reinforced the idea that women were instruments for political and social maneuvering. Their virginity was a commodity, a political tool used to build dynasties and maintain order. So, when you think about ancient Rome, remember this. The pressure on a woman to remain a virgin wasn't just about personal morality. It was a high-stakes political game where her body was a playing piece. Her purity symbolized the purity of the state. Her honor was the family's honor, and her choices or lack thereof could ripple through every layer of society, from the Senate floor to the sacred temples. It was a world where, in the heart of ancient Rome, a sacred flame burned day and night. This wasn't just any fire. It was the Vesta, the eternal flame of Rome, a symbol of the city's continuity and very soul. Tending to this fire was a group of women unlike any other. The Vestal Virgins. To be chosen as a Vestal was the highest honor a Roman woman could receive. Plucked from noble families as young girls, they dedicated 30 years of their lives to the goddess Vesta, swearing a strict vow of chastity. These women were revered. They lived in a grand villa, the house of the Vesta, right in the Roman Forum. They had special privileges. They could own property, make wills, and even had the best seats at the gladiatorial games. On the streets, they were preceded by a lictor, a special attendant who cleared their path. If a condemned prisoner on their way to execution happened to cross paths with a Vestal, they were automatically pardoned. That's how much power and respect they commanded. To harm a Vestal was a sacrilege of the highest order, a crime so heinous it was punishable by death. The idea was almost unthinkable. For Romans, the purity of the Vestals was directly linked to the safety and prosperity of Rome itself. If the flame went out, or if a Vestal's vow was broken, it was seen as a terrifying omen, a sign that the gods had abandoned them. But Rome would soon be ruled by a man who respected neither gods nor traditions, an emperor whose name would become a byword for tyranny and depravity. Caligula. When Caligula came to power, Rome was initially filled with hope. He was the son of the beloved General Germanicus, and people cheered his ascension. But this hope quickly curdled into fear. Caligula's reign descended into a whirlwind of madness, extravagance, and cruelty. He declared himself a living god, built a bridge of boats across the Bay of Naples for a 2-day party, and infamously was said to have planned to make his favorite horse, incitatus, a consul. In this atmosphere of fear and absurdity, no tradition was safe, not even the most sacred. Caligula saw the Vestal Virgins not as holy priestesses, but as a challenge to his absolute power. He began to attend their sacred rites, not out of piety, but with a leering gaze. The historian Suetonius tells us that Caligula broke every rule of divine and human law. He forced himself upon the Vestals, committing an act that struck at the very heart of Roman religion and identity. Imagine the terror and confusion, the guardians of Rome's sacred flame, women protected by centuries. It proved to the Roman elite that their emperor was not just eccentric, but a dangerous madman who threatened the entire foundation of their world. The senators and the Praetorian Guard, who had once supported him, began to plot. They couldn't allow this desecration to continue. Caligula's reign of terror lasted less than 4 years. He was assassinated by the very guards sworn to protect him.